You're listening to Standing Tall. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Cora.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 1. The Unseen Scars. Oliver Hayes had mastered the art of invisibility. He wasn't the kind of student who faded into the background because he wanted to, he did it because he had to. The hallways of Westbrook High were nothing short of a battlefield, and he had long ago learned that the best way to survive was to stay out of sight, to shrink himself so small that even the cruelest of bullies wouldn't find him worth their time. Yet despite his efforts, Jason Carter always did. Oliver sat in the farthest corner of the art classroom, hunched over his sketchbook, a pencil dancing across the page. He wasn't sketching anything in particular, just letting his hand move, lines twisting and overlapping, forming an image his mind hadn't fully processed yet. His drawings had always been his escape, the only way he could express the thoughts and emotions he could never bring himself to say out loud. The bell rang, signaling the start of fourth period, and students trickled into the room. Oliver instinctively tensed, gripping his pencil tighter as familiar voices filled the space. "Man, I don't get why we even have to take this class," Jason's voice rang out, loud and confident as always. "It's not like drawing pretty pictures is gonna get anyone into college." His friends chuckled, but Oliver kept his head down, hoping, praying, that today Jason wouldn't bother him. "Hey, Oliver." His stomach tightened. Jason slid into the seat beside him, his presence an uninvited force that Oliver had come to dread. Jason wasn't just any bully, he was Westbrook High's golden boy, a senior with an easy smile and a talent for making people laugh, even when he was tearing someone down in the process. He wasn't just physically intimidating, he was socially untouchable. Oliver didn't respond. He kept sketching, pretending Jason wasn't there. "Wow," Jason drawled, leaning over to glance at the page. "That's creepy as hell." Oliver's hands stilled. The sketch had taken a darker turn than he realized. Twisted tree branches, hollow-eyed figures lurking in the shadows. He wasn't sure where it had come from, but then again maybe he was. Jason's fingers tapped the edge of Oliver's sketchbook. "You ever think about, drawing something normal? I don't know, maybe a dog or something?" The group behind him snickered and Oliver felt heat creep up his neck. "Or maybe you just like drawing messed up stuff because you're, Jason lowered his voice, though it was loud enough for his friends to hear. "A freak." Oliver clenched his jaw, but he said nothing. This was how it always went. Jason poked and prodded, waiting for a reaction. The worst thing Oliver could do was give him one. "Hey," Jason continued, unfazed by the silence. "I'm talking to you." Oliver's fingers curled around his pencil, knuckles white. "Come on, man. Don't be rude." Jason reached forward and, without warning, ripped the sketchbook away from him. Oliver's heart lurched. "Give it back," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Jason smirked, flipping through the pages with exaggerated interest. "Damn dude. These are depressing. Do you even know what color is?" His friends laughed. One of them, Ryan, peered over Jason's shoulder. "Dude, is that supposed to be a self-portrait? No wonder it looks miserable." Oliver's stomach twisted. "Give it back," he repeated, reaching for the sketchbook. Jason yanked it away, holding it high above his head. "No, I think I'll keep it. Who knows? Maybe one day you'll be famous and I'll be able to sell this for $20. Oliver gritted his teeth, heat bubbling beneath his skin. He could already hear the teacher approaching, the room settling as class was about to begin. He knew how this would play out. If he fought back, Jason would only push harder. If he stayed quiet, Jason would get bored. That was how it always worked. But today something about it felt different. "Mr. Carter," a voice cut through the tension. The class stilled. Jason turned, his easy smirk still in place as the art teacher, Miss Caldwell, stood by her desk, arms crossed. She was young, barely in her 30s, but she had a presence that commanded attention. "Hand it over," she said. Jason hesitated for half a second before plastering on his signature grin. "Just admiring Oliver's work, Miss C. Didn't realize it was a crime to appreciate fine art." She didn't look amused. "Yow." Jason sighed dramatically, then, finally, tossed the sketchbook onto Oliver's desk. It landed with a soft thud, but Oliver still flinched. "Relax, dude," Jason muttered, shaking his head as he turned back to his seat. "No one cares." Oliver stared at the sketchbook for a moment, then slowly pulled it toward him, fingers trembling. Miss Caldwell didn't say anything else, but as she started class, Oliver could feel her gaze lingering on him for just a little too long. The rest of the period passed in a blur. Oliver kept his head down, focusing on the assignment, an abstract painting project, something that required color which wasn't exactly his strength. He worked in silence, blending muted shades of blue and gray, his mind still buzzing with the echoes of Jason's voice. By the time the bell rang, he was exhausted. He shoved his supplies into his bag, making a beeline for the door, eager to disappear into the crowd before Jason and his friends caught up. But as he stepped into the hallway, he nearly ran straight into someone. "Oh, sorry," a voice said. Oliver blinked. A girl stood in front of him, her arms full of books. She had light brown hair tied up in a messy bun, sharp green eyes that held an energy he wasn't used to. He took a step back, unsure what to say. She tilted her head. "You're Oliver, right?" His stomach twisted. He didn't like it when people knew his name. It usually meant trouble. "Yeah," he said cautiously. She smiled. "I'm Emma. Emma Sinclair. I just transferred here last week." Oliver hesitated. "Okay." Emma shifted her books to one arm and pointed toward the art room. "I saw what happened in there. That guy's a total jackass." Oliver stiffened. His instinct was to deny it, to downplay everything. "It's nothing." Emma raised an eyebrow. "Didn't really look like nothing." Oliver exhaled, glancing down the hallway where Jason and his group were already disappearing into the crowd. "It doesn't matter." Emma studied him for a moment, then shrugged. "If you say so." She turned to leave but then paused. "By the way, your art is really good. Don't listen to him." Oliver stared at her, caught off guard. Compliments weren't something he was used to. He didn't know how to respond, so he didn't. Emma just smiled, gave him a small wave and walked away. Oliver stood in the hallway for a long moment before sighing, clutching his sketchbook a little tighter. Maybe today wasn't all bad. Oliver barely spoke for the rest of the day. Not that it was unusual. Silence had always been his refuge, a barrier between him and the world that never quite understood him. But something about today felt different. Jason's words still clung to him like a stain he couldn't wash away, but Emma's voice echoed just as loudly. "That guy's a total jackass." The way she had said it, so casual, so certain, was strange to him. People usually avoided acknowledging what happened to him. Most students at Westbrook High had a silent agreement. Don't get involved, don't make yourself a target. Yet Emma had walked right up to him and said it out loud as if it were the most natural thing in the world. And then there was the compliment. "Your art is really good." Oliver wasn't sure why that stuck with him more than anything. Compliments about his drawings weren't common, especially not from strangers. Art was personal to him, a piece of himself he poured onto paper. Jason's insults had chipped away at that, but Emma's words, so simple, so direct, had left a mark he didn't know how to process. By the time the last bell rang, Oliver had already mapped out the quickest route to the exit, avoiding the usual spots where Jason and his friends lurked. He pulled his hoodie over his head as he stepped outside, the cool autumn air nipping at his skin. Most students lingered near the school entrance, chatting in clusters, waiting for rides or making plans. Oliver had no one waiting for him, no plans to make. His afternoons always looked the same. A quiet walk home followed by hours spent sketching in his bedroom, lost in a world far away from Westbrook High. He had just started down the sidewalk when a voice called out, "Hey, Oliver." He stiffened, his first instinct to keep walking. But when he turned his head, he saw Emma jogging to catch up with him, her backpack slung over one shoulder. "I thought that was you," she said, falling into step beside him. "You walk home." Oliver hesitated before nodding. Emma grinned. "Cool. Me too." He blinked at her. "You live around here?" "Just moved in last week," she said. "A couple blocks away. Thought I'd try walking instead of taking the bus." Oliver didn't know what to say to that. He wasn't used to people walking with him. They walked in silence for a few moments, the sounds of rustling leaves and distant car horns filling the space between them. "So," Emma said finally, glancing at him, "you always let guys like Jason mess with you like that?" Oliver tensed. His fingers curled around the strap of his backpack. Emma sighed. "Sorry. That sounded rude. I just meant, doesn't it piss you off?" Of course it did. Every single day. But anger was dangerous. Anger made people notice you. And people like Jason loved when you reacted. Oliver exhaled slowly. It doesn't matter. Emma gave him a look. It does though. He didn't respond. They reached an intersection, the crosswalk light blinking red. Emma shifted her weight watching him. You know, when I was in my old school there was this guy, Daniel Harper. Basically the Jason Carter of that place. Thought he was invincible, treated people like crap. Oliver kept his gaze forward, but he was listening. Emma crossed her arms. One time he pulled a stunt on this freshman kid. Locked him in a janitor's closet for an hour just for fun. The teachers barely did anything and the other students? They just let it happen. Her voice hardened. That's the part that always got me. Not just the bullies but the people who watched and did nothing. Oliver swallowed. That was Westbrook High in a nutshell. I don't know, Emma continued. Maybe I'm just wired differently. But I don't like pretending not to see things. Oliver wasn't sure if she expected him to say something, but before he could think of a response, the light changed. They started walking again, the conversation hanging in the air. After a few minutes, Emma spoke again. So, do you have, like, a favorite artist or something? The sudden shift in topic caught him off guard. What? Emma shrugged. You're clearly talented. Who inspires you? Oliver hesitated, but the question was safe. Normal. So he answered. Francis Bacon. Emma blinked. Like the philosopher? Oliver almost smiled. The painter. Oh. Right. She made a thoughtful face. I don't think I know his work. He did a lot of unsettling, distorted paintings, Oliver said. Dark stuff. But not just horror. More like psychological. Emma nodded. That makes sense. He glanced at her. It does. She smirked. Well, your sketches kinda scream psychological horror, so yeah. Oliver didn't know if that was meant as a compliment, but it made him chuckle under his breath. It was barely audible, but Emma caught it. Oh my God. She gasped dramatically. Was that a laugh? Do you actually have a sense of humor, Oliver Hayes? He rolled his eyes, but the corners of his lips twitched. They reached a fork in the road. Emma pointed to the left. That's me. You. Oliver nodded toward the right. She gave him a two-finger salute. Cool. Guess I'll see you tomorrow. Oliver hesitated, then nodded. Yeah. See you. Emma grinned and turned away, walking toward her house. Oliver stood there for a second, watching her go before continuing his own path. The house was quiet when he got home. His mom worked late shifts and his dad wasn't around anymore. Oliver dropped his bag on the floor and headed straight to his room. He closed the door behind him, exhaling as the weight of the school day settled in his chest. He sat at his desk, flipping open his sketchbook. The page was still marred with Jason's fingerprints, a smudge where his greasy hands had touched it. Oliver grabbed a pencil and, without thinking, started sketching. At first, the lines were sharp, chaotic, reflections of the frustration still lingering inside him. But as the image took shape, something unexpected happened. A figure emerged, a girl with messy hair and bright eyes, standing against a backdrop of tangled shadows. Emma. Oliver stared at the drawing, his pencil hovering. He had never sketched anyone from real life before. His art was always faceless figures, abstract horrors, reflections of things he couldn't put into words. But here she was, right in the center of his page. He wasn't sure why he had drawn her. Maybe because she had been the only good thing about today. Maybe because she saw him when no one else did. Oliver let out a slow breath. Maybe for the first time in a long while he wasn't entirely invisible.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You're listening to Standing Tall. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Cora.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 2, Shadows in the Hallway. Oliver had always been good at disappearing. Not literally, of course, but in the way that mattered. He knew the quietest corners of the school, the hallways to avoid, the precise moments to slip through doors unnoticed. But ever since Emma had barged into his life, that invisibility was starting to crack. It wasn't just that she talked to him, it was the way she did it. Loud, direct, unafraid. As if they'd been friends forever. As if it wasn't strange for someone like her, confident, new, untouched by the unspoken rules of Westbrook High, to be seen with someone like him. And people were noticing. It had only been a day since they'd walked home together, but by morning the whispers had already started. Who's the new girl talking to Oliver? She doesn't know, does she? She'll figure it out soon enough. Oliver kept his head down as he made his way through the halls, gripping the strap of his backpack. He should have expected this. Attention was dangerous. Oliver. He didn't have to turn to know who it was. Emma fell into step beside him, completely unfazed by the stares. Morning. He gave her a sidelong glance. You don't have to walk with me. Emma scoffed. Yeah, I do. That's how friendships work. His steps faltered. We're friends. Emma stopped in the middle of the hallway. Wait. He pointed at him. Are you seriously questioning my friendship skills right now? Oliver blinked. I mean, I did save your art yesterday, she said, crossing her arms. I walked home with you. I even pretended not to notice when you laughed. I didn't. Emma held up a hand. Let me have this. Oliver sighed. Fine. Emma grinned. See? Progress. She started walking again and Oliver had no choice but to follow. As they neared their lockers, a group of students passed by, their conversation just loud enough to hear. She'll get tired of him soon. Probably just feels bad for him. Emma stiffened. Oliver did too, but he forced himself to act like he hadn't heard. It was nothing new. The words didn't matter. But Emma? She stopped dead in her tracks. Before he could react, she turned sharply on her heel, facing the group. Hey. They froze, clearly not expecting to be called out. Emma raised an eyebrow. You guys know we can hear you, right? One of them, a blonde girl, scoffed. And? Emma tilted her head. And it's kinda pathetic. If you're gonna talk about someone, at least have the guts to say it to their face. Oliver's heart pounded. This was exactly the kind of attention he didn't need. The girl sneered. Why do you even care? Emma shrugged. 'Cause it's boring. You're boring. Like seriously? That's what you do with your life. Whisper about people who don't even bother you. The girl opened her mouth, then closed it. The group exchanged glances, clearly thrown off by Emma's directness. Oliver wanted to disappear. Emma, however, looked completely unbothered. She turned back to him. Come on. Let's go. She strode off like nothing had happened. Oliver hesitated for half a second before following. The whispers didn't stop, but they changed. Who's this girl? Is she seriously defending Oliver? She's gonna regret that. Oliver clenched his jaw. He hated this. He hated that she was making herself a target because of him. Once they reached their lockers, he finally spoke. You didn't have to do that. Emma rolled her eyes. You keep saying that, but I kinda did. No, you didn't. Emma shut her locker and faced him. So what, you think I should have just ignored it? Yes. Her expression softened. That's what you do, isn't it? Oliver exhaled through his nose. It's easier. Maybe. She leaned against her locker. But it's not better. He didn't have a response for that. The rest of the morning passed in a blur. Oliver kept his head down, avoiding unnecessary interactions, but Emma was impossible to ignore. She sat with him at lunch. She made sarcastic comments in class that made him smirk. She didn't care that people were staring. And that terrified him. By the time the last period rolled around, he felt the weight of it settling in his chest. He knew how these things worked. People like Jason didn't like when things changed. And Jason had noticed. It happened between classes. Oliver had just stepped into the empty hallway when a voice stopped him. Well, look who's suddenly worth talking about. He turned slowly. Jason leaned against the lockers, arms crossed, smirking. Behind him, two of his friends loitered, watching like they always did. Oliver's pulse quickened. He forced himself to stay calm. Jason tilted his head. I gotta admit, I didn't think anyone would ever willingly talk to you. He grinned. Guess new girl doesn't know any better. Oliver didn't respond. Jason stepped closer. I wonder how long that'll last. Oliver clenched his jaw. You think she's actually your friend? Jason laughed. Dude. He pities you. That's all this is. She'll get bored and leave just like everyone else. Oliver swallowed hard. He knew better than to react, but Jason always knew how to find the cracks. Or maybe, Jason mused, I should talk to her. Let her know what kind of loser she's wasting her time on. Oliver's fists tightened at his sides. Jason smirked. Huh. There it is. You don't like that, do you? Oliver forced himself to breathe. He couldn't do this. Not here. Not now. Jason stepped even closer. Relax. I'm just looking out for her. Oliver knew that was a lie. He also knew that if Jason talked to Emma, things would get worse. Way worse. And for the first time in a long while, Oliver wasn't just worried about himself. The rest of the day felt like a countdown to disaster. By the time school ended, Oliver was already bracing himself for whatever Jason had planned. He scanned the crowd outside looking for Emma. Jason got to her first. Yo, Oliver. He turned. Emma was by the school gates, waving like nothing was wrong. Oliver exhaled in relief and made his way toward her. We should go. Emma frowned. What's with you? Just, let's walk. Emma fell into step beside him, but she was watching him carefully. You're acting weird. Oliver hesitated. Jason, he's gonna try to mess with you. Emma's expression darkened. Oh really? He sighed. Just, don't listen to him. Emma snorted. Oliver. Do I look like someone who listens to guys like Jason? Oliver exhaled. No. But. Good. Then don't worry about it. Oliver always worried about it. Emma, however, didn't seem concerned at all. And that scared him more than anything. Emma wasn't the type to let people push her around. That much was obvious. But Oliver wasn't sure she understood what she was getting herself into. Jason wasn't just a bully, he was the bully. The kind who made sure no one forgot their place. He wasn't loud or impulsive like some of the other jerks at Westbrook High. He was calculated. The kind who smiled while ruining your life. And now, for the first time in years, Oliver wasn't the only one in Jason's crosshairs. Emma was walking straight into it. She didn't seem to care. They walked in silence for a few blocks, the school shrinking behind them. The afternoon air was crisp, the sun casting long shadows over the quiet neighborhood. Oliver kept glancing at her, waiting for the moment she'd crack. The moment she'd ask him to explain. He didn't. Finally he sighed. You're really not worried? Emma shrugged. Not really. Oliver frowned. You should be. She gave him a sideways look. Why? Because Jason doesn't like me talking to you. Yes. Emma scoffed. Wow. And here I thought you were the smart one. He blinked. What? Emma stopped walking, turning to face him. You seriously think I'm gonna back off just because some insecure loser doesn't like it? Oliver looked away. It's not that simple. Sure it is. Emma crossed her arms. You're my friend. Jason's a jerk. End of story. Oliver let out a bitter laugh. It's never the end of the story with him. Emma studied him for a long moment. He's really done a number on you, huh? Oliver didn't answer. He didn't need to. Emma sighed. Look, I get it. You've been dealing with him for a long time. But I'm not scared of him. You should be, Oliver muttered. Emma shook her head. You know what scares me more? Letting people like him win. Oliver exhaled slowly. He wanted to believe her. He really did. But he knew better. By the time Oliver got home, his nerves were shot. His mom was at work as usual, leaving him with the familiar silence of an empty house. He dropped his bag by the door and went straight to his room, shutting the door behind him. He needed to think. Jason wasn't going to let this go. Not now. If Oliver had learned anything over the years, it was that Jason hated change. And right now, Emma was change in the worst possible way. A sharp ding interrupted his thoughts. Oliver glanced at his phone. Emma, hey. You okay? He hesitated. He wasn't used to people checking in on him. Oliver, yeah. Emma, obviously. But you stress too much. Oliver, you don't stress enough. Emma, one of us has to be normal. Oliver huffed a quiet laugh. Emma, anyway. Just wanted to make sure you weren't having an existential crisis or whatever. Oliver hesitated before typing. Oliver, too late. Emma's reply came almost instantly. Cool. Let me know when you're done. Oliver shook his head. Oliver, I mean it, Emma. Be careful. She didn't answer right away. Then, Emma, always. But somehow Oliver wasn't convinced. The next morning, Oliver had a bad feeling before he even got to school. The hallways felt different, charged with something unspoken. People were staring, whispering. And when he got to his locker, he understood why. Scrawled across the metal in thick black marker were 2 words. Stay away. Oliver's stomach dropped. The laughter started before he could react. Damn man. Guess someone really doesn't like you. Maybe he should listen for once. Oliver swallowed hard. He knew better than to let them see a reaction. He forced himself to keep his face blank, his body still. Then a new voice cut through the noise. Seriously? This is the best you guys could come up with. Oliver turned. Emma stood beside him, arms crossed, glaring at the crowd like they were beneath her. The hallway went quiet. Emma scoffed. Wow. So scary. A couple of words on a locker. She rolled her eyes. Real creative guys. A few people shifted uncomfortably. Jason was nowhere in sight, but Oliver knew this had his name written all over it. Emma sighed dramatically. Honestly, I expected more. This is just sad. Someone in the crowd snickered. Oliver blinked. Was she mocking them? Emma turned to him. Hey, you got a marker. He stared at her. What? A marker. She gestured to the writing. Figured we should add something. Oliver hesitated, then slowly pulled a black Sharpie from his bag. He always carried one for sketching. Emma took it, popped the cap off, and before Oliver could stop her, scribbled something under the original message. When she stepped back, Oliver read her addition. Make me. The hallway went dead silent. Then someone laughed. Another chuckled. And just like that, the tension cracked. Oliver's chest felt tight, but it wasn't from anxiety this time. Emma smirked, handing the marker back. There. Much better. Oliver stared at her. You're insane. He grinned. You're welcome. A few people walked away, clearly unimpressed. The moment was already fading. Jason wouldn't like that. Oliver wasn't sure whether to be relieved or terrified. Emma, as usual, didn't seem to care. She slung her bag over her shoulder. Come on. We've got class. Oliver hesitated before following. For the first time in years he wasn't walking alone. And for the first time in years he wasn't sure if that was a good thing.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You're listening to Standing Tall. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Cora.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 3: The First Strike. Emma might not have been scared of Jason, but Oliver knew better than to think Jason would just let this go. And sure enough, the fallout began the very next day. The morning started off fine. Almost too fine. No new threats on his locker. No whispered taunts in the hall. Jason was nowhere to be seen. For a brief, fleeting moment, Oliver let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, Emma's little stunt had worked. That maybe Jason had realized how ridiculous this whole thing was and decided to move on. Then lunchtime happened. Oliver didn't usually sit in the cafeteria. Too many people. Too many eyes. But Emma did. And Emma wasn't about to let him hide in the library. I don't get why you avoid this place, she said, plopping her tray down onto the table. It's not that bad. Oliver raised an eyebrow as he sat across from her. You mean aside from the noise, the chaos, and the fact that it's basically a social minefield? Emma shrugged. You make it sound so dramatic. Because it is dramatic. Emma smirked and took a bite of her sandwich. Well, good news, you're sitting with me now. So no one's gonna mess with you. Oliver wasn't so sure about that. He felt the stares before he even turned his head. Jason and his group were sitting at their usual table across the cafeteria. Jason wasn't looking directly at them, but Oliver knew he saw them. He always saw everything. Oliver's stomach twisted. Emma, as always, didn't seem to care. So, she said, nudging his tray. Are you actually gonna eat or just sit there looking miserable? Oliver blinked. A loud crash cut him off. A few tables away, a freshman had just dropped their tray. The cafeteria erupted in laughter. Oliver winced. He knew exactly how that felt. Emma, however, was already looking past the commotion, straight at Jason. Something was off. Jason wasn't laughing. He wasn't smirking. He was watching. And he was smiling. A slow, knowing smile that made Oliver's skin crawl. Emma frowned. What's his deal? Oliver stiffened. I don't know. He did. Something was coming. It happened after school. Oliver was halfway to his locker when he heard Emma's voice. No. Seriously. You don't want to do this. His stomach dropped. He turned the corner. And froze. Jason stood in front of Emma, leaning against the lockers with that same lazy smirk. A couple of his guys flanked him, effectively blocking her in. Oliver's breath caught. Emma, to her credit, didn't look scared. Just annoyed. Jason tilted his head. I don't know, Emma. Do I want to do this? Emma crossed her arms. If you're asking me, you probably already know the answer. Jason chuckled. See, that's the problem with you. He tapped a finger against the locker. You don't know when to stop. Emma raised an eyebrow. And you do. Jason's smirk didn't falter. He glanced at one of the guys beside him. You hear that? She thinks I don't know how to stop. The guy Ryan, Oliver realized, grinned. Sounds like she's asking for a lesson. Oliver's stomach twisted. Jason turned back to Emma. What do you think? Should we teach you? Emma didn't flinch. I think you're wasting my time. Jason chuckled again. You're funny. I like that. He leaned in slightly. But here's the thing, Emma. You don't belong here. Emma's expression didn't change. What? In high school? Jason's smirk faded slightly. In his life. Oliver's blood went cold. Emma blinked. Excuse me. Jason straightened, his casual demeanor turning sharp. This isn't your fight. It never was. His eyes flickered past her, past the hallway, straight to Oliver. So why don't you do us all a favor and walk away? Oliver swallowed hard. Emma tilted her head. Wow. That almost sounded like a threat. Jason smiled again. Did it? Ryan chuckled. I mean, it kinda was. Emma sighed. You guys are exhausting. She stepped forward. For a split second, Oliver's heart stopped. But she didn't run. Didn't cower. She simply walked. Right past Jason. Right past Ryan. Right through them like they weren't even worth her time. And then, without even looking back, she said, I'm not going anywhere. Silence. A muscle in Jason's jaw twitched. Ryan frowned. Oliver barely breathed. Emma glanced over her shoulder. You coming? Oliver hesitated, then hurried after her. The moment they turned the corner, his heart finally started beating again. Emma exhaled. Well, that was fun. Oliver gave her a look. Fun. He shrugged. A little dramatic, but I was right. Jason's just insecure. Oliver ran a hand through his hair. Emma, that wasn't just drama. That was him warning you. Emma stopped walking. And? Oliver stared at her. And, you should be worried. Emma studied him for a long moment. Then she sighed. I get why you're scared, Oliver. Her voice was softer now. I do. But I'm not backing down. And you don't have to either. Oliver swallowed hard. His phone buzzed. He pulled it out and immediately felt sick. A message. From an unknown number. Stay away from her. A photo was attached. It was his locker. Only now, instead of stay away, the words had been crossed out. Replaced with something new. Final warning. Oliver's hands shook. Emma peeked over his shoulder. She didn't say anything. He didn't need to. As they both knew. This wasn't just about Oliver anymore. Jason had made his move. And now the real game was beginning. Emma didn't flinch. Not when she read the message. Not when she saw the picture. But Oliver knew her well enough to see the shift. The way her fingers clenched, the slight narrowing of her eyes. She wasn't scared. She was angry. Okay, she said, shoving her phone into her pocket. So Jason's officially an idiot. Oliver let out a shaky breath. Emma, this isn't funny. I know it's not funny. She exhaled sharply. But come on. This whole anonymous threat thing? How predictable can you get? Oliver's grip on his phone tightened. It's not just predictable. It's dangerous. Emma turned to him fully, arms crossed. What are you saying, Oliver? He hesitated. I don't know. But I think we should be careful. Emma studied him. So what do you want to do? Just ignore it. Oliver swallowed. Maybe. Emma let out a frustrated sigh. Of course you do. Emma. No, listen to me, Oliver. Her voice was firm but not unkind. This is exactly what Jason wants. He wants you scared. He wants you to back down. And if we let him control us, if we let him decide how we act, then he's won. Oliver glanced back at his phone. Final warning. His skin crawled. Emma touched his arm gently. We don't have to fight him, Oliver. But we do have to stand our ground. Oliver exhaled slowly. He wanted to believe that. He really did. But Jason didn't play fair. And something in his gut told him this was just the beginning. The next day Oliver was on edge. Nothing happened, not right away. But the energy in the air had changed. People were whispering. Watching. It was subtle, but it was there. And then, in the middle of third period, his phone buzzed. He knew he shouldn't check it during class. But something told him he needed to. When he glanced at the screen, his stomach dropped. Another unknown number. Another message. Check your locker. Oliver barely heard the rest of the lesson. The second the bell rang, he practically sprinted through the hall. Emma caught up to him just as he reached his locker. Hey, what's going on? Oliver didn't answer. He just opened the door. And froze. Inside, every single one of his books had been shredded. Torn pages littered the bottom like confetti. His notebooks, his work were completely ruined. A sick, sinking feeling twisted in his gut. Emma inhaled sharply. Oh hell no. Oliver just stared. Jason had done a lot over the years. He had pushed, taunted, made Oliver's life miserable. But this was personal. A slow, mocking clap echoed through the hallway. Oliver didn't have to turn to know who it was. But Emma did. Jason stood a few feet away, grinning. Well, he said. Looks like someone's having a rough day. Emma's eyes darkened. You really think this is funny? Jason shrugged. I think it's interesting. Yeah, I warned you. And yet, here we are. Oliver's hands clenched into fists. What do you want, Jason? Jason smiled. Oh, don't look so upset, Oliver. This is just a reminder. A reminder of what? Emma snapped. Jason's gaze flickered to her. That you don't belong in this. Emma took a step forward. Oh, I belong just fine. Jason sighed dramatically. You really don't. Emma was ready to argue, but Oliver stepped in front of her. Enough. His voice was quiet but steady. Jason raised an eyebrow. Oliver took a breath. His heart was pounding, but he forced himself to meet Jason's gaze. You've made your point. Now leave us alone. Jason tilted his head. Oh, Oliver. You still don't get it. He leaned in slightly. This isn't about making a point. This is about teaching a lesson. Oliver's stomach twisted. Jason took a step back, his grin never fading. See you around. Then he walked away. Emma glared after him. That was some next-level psychopath nonsense. Oliver let out a shaky breath. Yeah. Emma turned back to his locker. Hey. We need a plan. Oliver frowned. A plan. Emma nodded. Jason's obviously not going to stop unless we make him. Oliver hesitated. Emma, I don't think fighting him is the answer. Emma exhaled. I'm not saying we start a war, Oliver. But we do need to do something. Oliver stared at the wreckage in his locker. The ripped pages. The destruction. Jason had gone too far. And for the first time in a long time, Oliver felt something new. Bigger. Real, burning, quiet anger. He looked at Emma. Okay. Emma raised an eyebrow. Okay. Oliver nodded. Let's do something. A slow smile spread across Emma's face. Now that's what I'm talking about. Oliver exhaled. Jason wanted a lesson? Maybe it was time he learned one.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You're listening to Standing Tall. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Cora.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 4, Breaking Point. Oliver had never been one for confrontation. For years his best strategy had been endure and survive. But after the destruction of his locker, something inside him had shifted. He wasn't just scared anymore. He was tired. And anger, sharp and quiet, had settled in his chest. Jason had pushed too far. And Oliver was done letting him win. All right, Emma said, plopping down across from Oliver at their usual lunch table. We need a plan. Oliver barely looked up from his tray. You keep saying that, but what does that actually mean? Emma rolled her eyes. It means we stop playing defense and start playing offense. Oliver frowned. Emma, we're not exactly in a war. Aren't we? Emma leaned forward, lowering her voice. Jason's been targeting you for years. And now that I'm involved, he's making it clear he's not backing down. This isn't just bullying Oliver. He's making it personal. Oliver exhaled. He knew she was right. But knowing it didn't make it easier. So what do we do? He asked. Emma grinned. We hit back. Oliver hesitated. How? Emma pulled out her phone and scrolled through something before holding it up. On the screen was a video, grainy, taken from a slightly tilted angle but unmistakable. In the parking lot. Slashing someone's bike tires. Oliver's eyes widened. Wait. Whose bike is that? Emma smirked. Coach Reynolds. Oliver nearly choked. Jason slashed Coach Reynolds' bike tires? Emma nodded, looking way too pleased with herself. And guess what? He has no idea this was caught on camera. Oliver stared at the screen. His brain was struggling to process this new information. If we show this to Reynolds. He started. Emma grinned. Jason is done. Oliver swallowed. Are you sure about this? Emma raised an eyebrow. You're really asking me that? Oliver hesitated. Felt like the right thing to do. Jason had been getting away with everything for too long. But something about it made his stomach twist. Like they were stepping into a game they weren't ready for. Emma must have noticed his hesitation because her expression softened. Oliver. You deserve justice. He's not just going to stop if we ignore him. You know that. Oliver exhaled. He did. And that's why after a long pause he nodded. He said. Let's do it. They waited until after school. Coach Reynolds' office was in the gym, tucked away near the weight room. Oliver's hands felt clammy as they approached the door. You ready? Emma whispered. Oh. But he nodded anyway. Emma knocked. A gruff, come in, came from the other side. They stepped inside. Coach Reynolds was seated at his desk, scribbling something on a clipboard. He barely looked up. What can I do for you? Emma glanced at Oliver. When he didn't immediately speak, she took over. Coach, we have something you need to see. Reynolds finally glanced up, his expression neutral. All right. Emma pulled out her phone and pressed play. The video ran for about 10 seconds. Then Reynolds leaned forward. His eyes narrowed. By the time the video ended, his face was unreadable. Silence filled the room. Then finally, that little punk, Reynolds muttered. Emma grinned. Yeah. That's what we thought. Reynolds exhaled sharply, running a hand through his buzzed hair. You two did the right thing bringing this to me, he said, voice calm but edged with something unreadable. I'll handle it from here. Oliver swallowed. What does that mean? Reynolds' gaze sharpened. It means Jason is about to learn what real consequences feel like. Oliver let out a slow breath. Emma smirked. That's all we needed to hear. They walked out of the office feeling lighter than they had in days. Well, Emma said, stretching her arms. That was satisfying. Oliver exhaled. Yeah. But even as he said it, the uneasy feeling in his gut didn't go away. Because Jason wasn't the kind of person to just accept consequences. And something told Oliver this wasn't over yet. By the next morning, the entire school was buzzing with rumors. Jason Carter had been called to Coach Reynolds' office. And he hadn't come out happy. Oliver wasn't sure what exactly went down, but the shift in energy was obvious. The hallways were filled with whispers, stolen glances, and the occasional smirk from students who had always wanted to see Jason knocked down a peg. Emma, as usual, was enjoying every second of it. I swear I've never seen him not look smug before, she said as they walked toward first period. I mean, the guy always acts like he owns the place. But today, my dear Oliver, he looks pissed. Oliver wasn't sure how to feel. He should have felt relieved. Jason finally faced consequences. He finally wasn't untouchable. And yet, that uneasy feeling hadn't left his stomach. Emma nudged him. Hey, you okay? Oliver hesitated before answering. I don't know. Emma frowned. What do you mean? Oliver exhaled. Jason's not the type to let something like this go. Emma waved a hand. So what? He got caught. He got punished. What's he gonna do? Cry about it. Oliver glanced around the hallway. Jason was nowhere to be seen. And that was what scared him. Jason never disappeared. I don't think it's over, Oliver admitted quietly. Emma scoffed. Come on, Oliver. For once we won. Enjoy it. Oliver wanted to believe that. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was coming. Something bad. His instincts proved right by lunchtime. The cafeteria was packed as usual, but something was off. People weren't just talking about Jason's punishment anymore. They were talking about something else. Oliver didn't realize what it was until he sat down across from Emma, and she shoved her phone in his face. You seen this? She asked. Oliver blinked. What? Emma tapped the screen. Jason posted something. Oliver's stomach twisted. He took the phone and read the post. It wasn't long. Some people like to act like victims. But the truth always comes out. Just wait. Smiley face. A chill ran down Oliver's spine. Emma huffed. He's bluffing. Oliver wasn't so sure. And the feeling got worse when he noticed people staring at him. Whispering. A few even laughed. Emma's eyebrows furrowed. Okay, what the hell is going on? Then someone at the next table snickered. Emma turned. Got something to say? The guy, some junior Oliver didn't even know, grinned. Nah. Just wondering how Oliver's gonna explain this. He slid his phone toward them. Oliver's chest tightened. It was a screenshot of an email to one of Oliver's teachers. And it was bad. The email looked like it was from Oliver's school account. It wasn't long, just a few sentences. But it accused the teacher, Mr. Grayson, of favoritism, of grading unfairly, of harassment. Oliver's hands went cold. I never wrote this, he whispered. Emma snatched the phone, her jaw tightening. Oh hell no. The guy smirked. Maybe you should talk to Grayson then. He doesn't look happy. Oliver turned his head, and sure enough, Mr. Grayson was across the cafeteria, looking right at him. His face was unreadable. But the tension in his posture was unmistakable. Emma grabbed Oliver's wrist. Come on. We're fixing this now. Mr. Grayson was pacing when they arrived at his classroom. He looked up immediately, arms crossed. Oliver. Oliver swallowed hard. Mr. Grayson, Did you write that email? Oliver shook his head, heart hammering. No. I swear I didn't. Grayson studied him. His expression was stern but not outright hostile. Emma stepped forward. It's fake. Grayson arched an eyebrow. You have proof. Emma clenched her fists. No, but think about it. Why would Oliver, of all people, send that? He's probably the least confrontational person in this school. Grayson didn't answer right away. Then he exhaled sharply. I believe you, he finally said. Oliver nearly sagged with relief. Grayson continued. But I need to take this to the principal. This is serious. Oliver nodded quickly. I understand. Grayson studied him a moment longer before saying, We'll get to the bottom of this. I won't let someone use my name to stir up trouble. Oliver exhaled. Thank you. But as they left the classroom, Emma was fuming. This is so Jason, she muttered. He gets caught, so now he's pulling this? Oliver rubbed his temples. I knew he'd do something. Emma growled. We need to get ahead of this. Oliver sighed. How? Emma stopped walking. Then she smirked. We make Jason prove he did it. Oliver frowned. What do you mean? Emma crossed her arms. We trick him into exposing himself. Oliver hesitated. That sounds risky. Emma shrugged. So was going to Reynolds. And that worked, didn't it? Oliver bit his lip. Jason had played his move. Now it was their turn.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You're listening to Standing Tall. Written by Akumah and voiceover by Cora.
Akumah Audiobooks.
Chapter 5. The Truth Unveiled. The weight of Jason's latest stunt hung over Oliver like a storm cloud. Even though Mr. Grayson believed him, the rumors spread fast. People whispered behind his back, some even sneering as he passed. Emma, of course, was furious. All right, she declared as they sat outside on the bleachers, their usual escape from the chaos of the cafeteria. We're shutting this down. Today. Oliver sighed. Easier said than done. We don't have proof. Emma smirked. Not yet. Oliver hesitated. Emma, what are you planning? She leaned in. We know Jason's behind the fake email. And we know he's arrogant enough to gloat when he thinks he's won. Oliver raised an eyebrow. So? Emma's grin widened. We make him gloat. Oliver blinked. You want to bait him? Exactly. That's risky. Emma shrugged. So, you scared? Oliver sighed. Terrified. Good, she said. Let's do it. Emma's plan was simple but dangerous. Push Jason until he couldn't resist bragging. They didn't have to wait long. By the time the last period ended, Jason was back to his usual smug self. He leaned against his locker, surrounded by his usual group, laughing like nothing had happened. Emma strode straight toward him. Oliver's stomach twisted, but he followed. Jason noticed them instantly. His grin widened. Well, if it isn't the school's favorite little victim. Emma rolled her eyes. Cut the act, Jason. Jason feigned innocence. Act? I have no idea what you're talking about. Emma smirked. Really? You expect us to believe that you had nothing to do with the fake email? Jason chuckled. Paranoid much? Emma leaned in. Come on, Jason. At least admit you're mad about Coach punishing you. Jason's grin flickered. Just for a second. Emma pressed harder. Oh wait, that's right, you got caught. That's gotta sting, huh? Jason's jaw tightened. Watch it. Emma tilted her head. Or what? You gonna fake another email? Maybe frame Oliver for something else? Real original. Jason scoffed. Please. You really think I need to do anything? Oliver's doing a great job ruining his own life. Oliver clenched his fists. Emma smirked. And yet, you do need to do something, don't you? Otherwise, why go through all this trouble? Jason's eye twitched. You don't know what you're talking about. Emma stepped closer. Don't I? Let's be real, Jason. You've spent years acting like you're untouchable. But now, people are laughing at you. Jason's nostrils flared. Emma's voice dropped to a taunting whisper. And you hate it, don't you? Jason's fingers curled into fists. Then, just as Emma had planned, he snapped. You think I care about some dumb detention? Jason sneered. I could have gotten worse and it still wouldn't matter. You think anyone actually believes Oliver's innocent? Please. One little email and boom, his reputation's shot. Silence. Jason's own friends went still. Emma smiled. Jason's eyes widened as he realized, too late, what he had just said. Oliver's pulse pounded. Jason had just admitted it. And even better, Emma had been recording the whole thing. They wasted no time. Emma sent the recording straight to Mr. Grayson, who forwarded it to the principal. Within the hour, Jason was called into the office. By the next morning, the entire school knew. Jason had been suspended. The whispers in the hallways changed. People who had laughed at Oliver the day before now avoided his gaze. Some even muttered awkward apologies. Emma basked in the victory. Finally, she said, grinning as they sat in their usual spot on the bleachers. Justice. Oliver sighed in relief. But something still felt unfinished. He had won. Jason had lost. So why did he still feel uneasy? As if sensing his thoughts, Emma nudged him. You okay? Oliver hesitated. Then he finally admitted it. I don't know, he said. I mean, yeah, Jason's gone, but he'll come back. Emma rolled her eyes. So, you won't have power anymore. He got exposed. Oliver sighed. I don't get it. Emma frowned. Get what? Oliver looked at her. Why me? Emma blinked. What do you mean? Jason had plenty of targets, Oliver said. Why did he spend years focusing on me? Emma was quiet for a moment. Then she said, maybe because you're everything he's not. Oliver frowned. What? Emma leaned back. Think about it. Jason's whole identity is being the guy on top. The one who always wins, the one people look up to, whether out of admiration or fear. Oliver listened. But you. Emma continued. You're not like that. You never needed to prove yourself to anyone. And people like you because of that. Oliver didn't know what to say. Emma smirked. Jason hated that. He hated that you didn't need to be him to matter. Oliver processed her words. For so long he had believed Jason tormented him because he was weak. But maybe Jason had tormented him because deep down he wasn't. A weight lifted off Oliver's chest. For the first time in years he felt free. Emma stretched. So, what now? Oliver exhaled. Then he smiled. We move on. Jason was gone. Suspended. His rule over the school shattered in a single moment of arrogance. But the aftermath of his downfall didn't bring the immediate relief Oliver had expected. Yes, the rumors had stopped. The whispers had died down. People no longer avoided him in the hallways or sent him those wary, doubting looks. Some even offered awkward smiles or hesitant apologies, as if expecting him to forgive them instantly. But Oliver wasn't sure what to do with their sudden change of heart. Because the damage had already been done. And some things weren't so easily forgotten. The weight of the past. It had been a week since Jason's suspension. Life at school felt different. Not necessarily better, not yet, but different. The biggest change was the silence. Jason's absence left a void, one that even his loyal group of followers didn't know how to fill. They still gathered at their usual spot, still acted like they ruled the school, but there was a hesitance now. A shift in power. Without Jason they had no leader. And without a leader they had no direction. But Oliver didn't care about them. He cared about the way people looked at him now. He had spent years being the kid no one defended. The easy target. The one people either ignored or, worse, helped tear down. And now, suddenly, people wanted to be on his side? He wasn't sure how to handle it. Emma, of course, had no such struggles. She was thriving in their victory. She didn't care about the sudden flood of apologies or the people trying to befriend them out of guilt. Let them squirm, she said, grinning as she threw an arm around Oliver's shoulders while they walked to lunch. They let Jason torment you for years. They feel bad now. Good. Oliver chuckled, but the truth was he wasn't sure if he agreed. Emma was right. But at the same time he didn't want to hold on to that anger. He just didn't know how to let it go. A conversation he didn't expect. It was a Wednesday when someone unexpected approached him. Oliver was at his locker, grabbing his books, when a voice cleared behind him. He turned. Ryan Carter. One of Jason's closest friends. Oliver stiffened immediately. Ryan had never been as outright cruel as Jason, but he had laughed at the jokes. Stood by and let things happen. Sometimes he had even joined in, making comments that, while not as brutal as Jason's, had still cut deep. Oliver's first instinct was to ignore him. But then he saw the look on Ryan's face. He looked nervous. Kitten. Oliver folded his arms. What do you want? Ryan exhaled. I just wanted to say sorry. Oliver blinked. Of all the people he had expected to say those words, Ryan had not been one of them. Ryan rubbed the back of his neck. I know I was part of it. And I know saying sorry doesn't change anything. But, he hesitated. I guess I just wanted you to know that I wasn't okay with a lot of it. He exhaled. I didn't know how to stop it. Oliver stared at him. For a long moment he didn't know what to say. Then he asked, why now? Ryan swallowed. Because I saw what happened. How Jason just threw you under the bus like it was nothing. And I realized he would have done the same to me. Or any of us. Oliver let his words sink in. He wasn't sure if Ryan truly meant it, or if he was just trying to save face now that Jason was gone. But at the same time, Oliver saw something genuine in his eyes. Maybe Ryan had been a coward. But maybe, just maybe, he was trying to be better. So Oliver nodded. That's a start. Ryan looked relieved. Thanks, man. He walked away. And Oliver, for the first time in a long time, felt a tiny piece of the weight lift. Moving forward. The days passed. The school adjusted. And so did Oliver. There were still moments when the past caught up to him. When he felt the old fears creeping in, the instincts to shrink away, to expect the worst. But then he would remind himself, Jason was gone. And more importantly, he was still here. Emma made sure he didn't fall back into old habits. Come on, she'd say, dragging him to the lunch table before he could even think about eating alone again. You're not a ghost. Act like it. And so, slowly he started reclaiming his place. People began talking to him like a person, not a victim. Some friendships, like the one with Ryan, still felt shaky, uncertain. But they were there. And that was a start. Then one day something happened that truly told Oliver things were changing. It was during lunch. Emma and Oliver were sitting at their usual spot when a younger student, a freshman, walked by. He was carrying his tray, looking for a place to sit. But the moment he passed a certain table, a senior stuck out their foot. The kid tripped. His tray clattered to the ground. Laughter erupted from the table. Oliver froze. A month ago he would have stayed silent. A month ago he would have looked away, pretending not to see. But he wasn't that person anymore. So before he even had time to think, he was already moving. He walked over, bent down, and helped the kid pick up his tray. You okay? The freshman nodded quickly, his face red with embarrassment. Why, yeah. Oliver gave him a reassuring smile. Then he looked up at the senior responsible. And in a calm, steady voice he said, Not funny. The senior blinked. Something about Oliver, his confidence, the way he held his ground, made the guy hesitate. A moment later he scoffed and turned back to his table, muttering something under his breath. But he didn't try anything else. And when Oliver led the freshman to an empty seat at a different table, the kid looked up at him with quiet gratitude. Oliver nodded. And in that moment he realized. This was how things changed. Not all at once. Not with one big moment of victory. But with small choices, every single day. Jason had tried to break him. But he survived. Now it was his turn to stand tall. For himself. And for others too. Think.
Akumah Audiobooks.
You have reached to the end of the story. Thank you for listening to Akumah Audiobooks. For more stories like this, refer to channel playlist and stay tuned by subscribing to the channel.